Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Center workshop today on how to start your own small business. So I see a few people have joined us here, and I'm going to start out by unmuting you one by one and just kind of asking you if you would describe what you've got in mind as far as starting a business, what type of business, what stage you're at, and maybe what you would like to hear in particular from today's session, if you have any particular questions. So I'm going to unmute Claude. Hi, Claude.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. So give us an idea. What are you up to?
Actually, I have a concept in mind, and I would like to start a small business with a art gallery, a membership art gallery, the city of Hartford.
Great. Okay.
And
That's go ahead.
yes, I'm in the beginning stages. I just came up with the name and just a concept.
Okay. Well, just by coincidence, in the other room, my wife is on another Zoom meeting, and she is uh, linked into a an art session. So somehow or other, she's talking to somebody right now that's telling her, instructing her about painting or sketching or something like that. So that's kind of funny. All right, good, Claude. Anything in particular you're looking to get out of this session?
I'm just trying to get out of the session. I'm looking possibly getting started with this a year from now. So I'm just trying to figure out how do I start? I know
Oh, good.
I have
All right.
limited
Well,
capital.
good. That's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, let's go on and hear from Joe. Hello, Joe. Whoop, hold it. I got to unmute you. Hello, Joe.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Excellent. My name is Joe Modeste, and I would like to start a consulting business for grant reviewing and writing. And I
Hmm.
really do this, as a 9 to 5 position um, for a government agency, but I'd really like to do it myself independently. Um, and I I just want to find out how I can get reliable customers because I know the need is out there, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure how to tap into that because I'm really good at what I do for agencies, but I'd like to also do it for myself. Um,
Okay,
so
great.
from this, I'd
Okay,
just get more ideas of how I actually begin to get customers and how I market myself.
okay, super. Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, Luth, give us a little idea about if you've got a business in mind, what it is, what stage you're at, and what you'd like to get out of the session today. Oh, they didn't unmute again, or it didn't
No
work.
worries.
Luth, now,
Hello.
now I can hear you.
Hi,
Okay.
my name's Liz Holmes. I am the founder and creator of the Light LLC, which stands for it's a LLC and it stands for Love, Integrity, Grit, Health, and Trust, and it's a professional development for youth and young professionals to make them revolutionary assets of their community through portfolio building and connecting their networks and building relationships. And so I've had my business for about a year and it took off tremendously. At the beginning, I started school and I had to, take a little break. But as of this year, I started back on, and there's been a huge um, kind of pull for me to start doing some consultant work. And so I wanted to, at this point, I'm trying to figure out how I could leverage my business to go into consulting for project and program organizing, specifically with youth and young professionals.
Okay. What town do you work out of?
Um, I work. I've worked in multiple cities in Connecticut.
Well,
With
where would the business be? Let me
so
rephrase
the
that.
business is it's in Hartford.
In Hartford. Okay, that's all good.
Hmm.
Right. Good. And what would you like to get out of today's session?
I'm really just figuring out how I can expand my services and then go into um, what further steps I need to take to do so, whether it's maybe becoming I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would need to become a 501c3 or if I'm good with just
Okay,
getting to LLC. So really figuring out what I should do
good.
next.
Good. I'm going to touch on that too. So that's good. All right. Thank you. And let's see. Let's ask Amy. Amy, tell us a little bit about your business idea, what stage you're at, and what you'd like to get out of today's session. Amy, unmute. There you go.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Let's see. I have a couple different business ideas. I'm not really nailed anything down yet. I don't really have a focus. I'm really just here to learn and see what I might need to do. Yeah, I'm not really focused at all. I'm just kind of here
That's
to
fine.
learn. I
That's
don't have a
fine.
great answer for you today.
It all starts at that point. So good.
Okay.
Thank you. And then fine, we'll do one more, and that is Obi. Tell us about your idea.
Hello, my name is Kobe Smith, and I am currently working on a clothing business, and I really want to just attend this to better understand, marketing, more of the logistics and the back end side of the business, because I've always had the ideas, but the execution is something I've always struggled with, whether it be putting my ideas actually out there, promoting myself, and just becoming a better salesperson. So that's really what I want to get out of that today.
Okay.
Thank you.
And clothing, are you looking toward having a brick and mortar retail outlet or online, or what's your thoughts in that?
Well, I have a website currently, so I'll definitely be doing online, but definitely within like the future, probably the next 5 to 10 years, definitely do brick and mortar as well.
Okay, super.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, well, we'll try one more here. Janine just joined us. Janine, tell us a little bit about your business idea, what stage you're at, and what you'd like to get out of the class today. You there, Janine?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so my business idea is it's a bounce fitness program using rebound boots. It was introduced here in Connecticut back in 2018 by some individuals who have a similar program in Maryland. I've been studying rebound fitness for quite some time, and I've been going through the trademark process for my business. It's called Bacchanal Bounce, working on the website. I've had a couple business advising sessions with Lacey at the Entrepreneurial Center, and we've gone through the general structure of my business. So I'll be offering fitness classes, but I also want to incorporate a financial or economic ability aspect to it, where I'm offering certification to other instructors to develop or have their own bounce program under my umbrella, similar to the Zumba model. And I have a logo designed, and I've also had boots designed and completed, and I also have t-shirts and other apparel that have been produced.
Okay, good. And is this going to be something that you'll have a physical location, or is this going to be remote, or how's that going to work?
So the intent initially is to get contracts with a bunch of with a bunch of gyms, and then also I have contracts with some spaces to offer my own classes, and then eventually I would love to have my own physical location down the line.
Okay, Super. All right. Well, thanks for contributing. So one of the things you see is everybody's got a different idea for a different type of business. And so what we try to do here is we touch on all of the general aspects of starting and running a business, and that is things that really apply to every business. And the more you get involved with whatever your particular business is, that's when you have to sort of explore all of the other routes of getting involved with industry groups, understanding what the particular business is all about, competition, et cetera, et cetera. So, but anyway, we'll try to give you some idea about the approach and stepping into starting a business. I could ask a number of other questions that have to do with your background and all the rest of it, but we don't really have that much time. So I'll talk about setting up one-on-one sessions if you're interested in the future. And so that would be kind of the next step if you're going to proceed along this line. So let me start out just talking about the Entrepreneurial Center and Women's Business Center. We've been around for about 30 years now. We're a small core group that currently has headquarters in East Hartford, but we operate primarily in the Metro Hartford area, but we do operate statewide in addition to that. So we have people that administer the programs, a lot of business advisors and instructors, and we also draw on an extensive list of professionals that we bring in to do individual workshops and everything. So we're here to serve and have been for a long time. You notice that it says the Entrepreneurial Center and the Women's Business Center. The Entrepreneurial Center is part of the Barney School of Business at the University of Hartford. And the Women's Business Center is a program that we deliver for the Small Business Administration. So the Women's Business Centers there are, I think, 100 plus throughout the nation. So that gives us a little bit different approach. So we do have a focus on dealing with women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, but we are open to anyone and everyone. So we offer a lot of workshops like you're attending today. We do business advising, kind of one-on-one. I'm a business advisor and an instructor. We try to promote networking, so to come up with events and programs that allow entrepreneurs to connect with one another, learn from other people that are doing the same thing as you are. We have a technical assistance program for the people that qualify, that gets down into providing some more specific assistance in the area of marketing, technology, legal, accounting, etc. And as things come up, we get involved in it. Recently, we spent a lot of time working with the federal government because they came out with a lot of loans and grants. And so we acted as the front end informational portal for them. And as those things come along, we work with that. So if you're not already receiving our weekly newsletter, that tells you about all of the upcoming free webinars like this, and we usually do between 10 and 15 a month. Make sure that you go to our website, which is hartford.edu/EC, and sign up for the newsletter. And so you'll just get that every week, and you can look and see what's being offered and sign up. Just about everything we offer is free to the client, and we have a couple of programs that have some minimal charges associated with it, but nothing that smacks of being expensive. Business advisors, so this is the crew right here. I'm the guy, and you can connect with anyone or multiple, for that matter, to set up one-on-one sessions. We usually schedule an hour session to begin with. We usually do it through Zoom like this, and we schedule a time that's mutually convenient. And now we can get into a little bit more about the specifics of your business. And so we talk with people in general. If they're just starting out, they need some general knowledge, we can do that. And then as we step through all of the stages, you might want to talk about market research and what you need to do in the marketing area. getting involved in selling, exploring social media and websites, financing, things that get into accounting and keeping track of how the business is doing, putting together business plans, connecting with funders, and what you need to do to be able to get loans, and sometimes even grants or other investment, and other connections. If you're a business that can profit from business with the government, we kind of have information about how to connect with that. So you just can call us. Later on, I'll give you my individual email address. You can always contact me directly or call into the general number or use the general email, which is ENTRECTR. It's shown here, Entrepreneur Center at Hartford.edu, requesting a one-on-one business advising session. So that's available. These are our sponsors. We deal with the Small Business Administration, federal agency, the state of Connecticut, Department of Economic and Community Development. We're funded partially by the Prudential Foundation, and we actually have an agreement with the city of Hartford so that we offer services, and they are at no cost. Even the people that participate don't even have to pay some of the minimal charges that we do make for certain programs. So where else are we? We're out in Facebook, so you can find us out there, or LinkedIn, and just more information about what's going on a regular basis. And the last thing in this particular presentation is at the end of the session, you will get an online pop-up survey. So give us some feedback on what you got out of it, any suggestions you have, and so that allows us to modify or add things that so what we produce in the future meets the needs of our clients. Okay, so what I'm going to now do is I'm going to switch to a different slide presentation. And so first of all, if you would like to have me send you a copy of these slides, there's 30 some odd slides in this presentation, just send me an email at some point, and my email is there, antonich@hartford.edu, and I will send you that information. At some point in the presentation, I'll be talking about developing a business plan, and a lot of this presentation steps through those sections because they're all of the elements that are involved in starting and running a business. And so I'll talk about a SCORE template, and if also you would like a copy of the template, which is a Word document and an Excel spreadsheet, I will also send that to you, and the link to where you can get it directly from score.org. So you don't have to take as many notes as you might have to. You can just send me the email, get the whole presentation. So today's title is How to Start Your Own Small Business. I'm going to mention one thing which is a little bit different. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I usually invite this fellow, Steve Rosenkrantz, to come in and take about 10 minutes to talk about a service that he provides that are for people that might be entertaining getting involved with a franchise. Franchises like everybody knows, McDonald's and Subway, sub sandwiches and stuff like that. So he deals with the whole host of different franchises, very knowledgeable. I only put this up here because if you want to, copy down his name, number, and perhaps email, if you're interested in understanding more about franchising, you can see srosenkrantz@esourcecoach.com. So just a plug for Steve. Okay, so now we're getting into the presentation. I've decided to add this one slide, which is kind of an upfront slide. One of the people here, I think maybe Lutz was mentioning about looking at nonprofit versus for-profit. So I do this because a lot of people come to the Entrepreneurial Center and they're just at the very beginning of thinking what to do, and what they need to do is to understand that if they are a more mission-oriented organization, that they should perhaps consider taking the path toward becoming a nonprofit entity versus a for-profit. So I put this slide together to just do a comparison on the major differences between the two in terms of you looking at what you want to accomplish. So first of all, at the top level, what's the purpose? Obviously, a for-profit is just that. It's really focused on generating profit, income. Those two words pretty much mean the same thing. And in many cases, I think people should remember that if you're talking about generating a profit in a business, that profit typically is also income for the owner, income for investors, income for the employees. So profit and income. So that's the focus there. When you look at a typical nonprofit organization, the first thing you typically see is their mission. Because they're focused on accomplishing some type of a mission. It usually is in the social services area. So they might be talking about providing some type of service, and maybe it's in a particular location where you've got maybe low-income population. They want to provide the services, but you're working with somebody that isn't necessarily in a position to pay for those services directly, but the services still need to be provided. So that's number one. What are you focusing on? Number two, we get down to the next level of, every organization needs some type of money, funding, capital to operate. So if you are on the for-profit side, your revenue will typically come from the sales of products and/or services. Interesting, whatever you offer, it falls into one of those two categories. Product, sometimes talked about goods, and services. So product is if I sell you this pen, it's a product. If I say I'll wash your car, that's a service. So one or the other. Some businesses offer both. I'll sell you a furnace, and I'll also sell you a service contract for the next 5 years to service that. So think of those two categories. When you're over on the nonprofit side, your revenue typically comes from grants and contributions. They might come from foundations. It might come from government entities at the federal, state, local level. Might come from philanthropists or other types of contributors. And when you are looking for that type of funding from a lot of those types of organizations like foundations, you might need to be structured as what is called a 501c3. And that is a charitable organization, meaning that if somebody gives you money, they're able to deduct it on their income tax. It's something that is an IRS, Internal Revenue Service, federal level designation, and you have to apply for that. So I think Luth mentioned already, she knowledgeable about being a 501c3. There are other types of nonprofits that aren't necessarily charitable, but this is the main one that a lot of people end up in because it avoids being taxed on what you end up with here. So that's the second major area. Where is the money coming from? How are you going to generate that incoming revenue? Then whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, you have expenses. So there's a variety of expenses. You pay people to do things. You may have facilities, offices, space, transportation, any number of different things. So both of the sides will incur that. When you subtract those expenses from the revenue, on the for-profit side, you're left with a profit. It's called a profit or loss. And that money can be distributed to the owners, investors, anybody else. When you're over on the other side, when you subtract your expenses from the revenue, you're left with either a surplus or a deficit. So a little bit different term, means the same thing, but that cannot be distributed. So when you're working in a nonprofit, any surplus that's generated has to remain within the organization and reinvested. So one of the things in terms of somebody who wants to set up an organization, in terms of getting their own personal income out of it, on the for-profit side, you can participate in the profit. On the nonprofit side, you're typically going to be working with a salary or wages, but not sharing in any type of excess or surplus that the nonprofit generates. So, think of those differences in terms of what you want to do. And at the bottom, I'll mention one other category, a little bit newer, but been around for about 10 or 15 years. It's called a social enterprise. And what that does is it sort of takes from both sides. It's typically a for-profit organization, but it also has an associated mission. And the combination of what you do on the profit side and what you do on the mission side is very flexible. So, there are some organizations like, let's take Newman's Own, okay? Paul Newman came up with a salad dressing. It caught on. He created a food business out of it. And he said, okay, but I don't really need the money, so I'm going to take 100% of the profit of that business, and I'm going to aim that and dedicate it to charitable causes. So they run the Hole in the Wall gang, and a lot of other organizations benefit by that, literally millions of dollars. So that's kind of one extreme where everything that's generated in profit goes to support a mission. The other side of it could be a nonprofit organization that puts a toe in the water in that they also offer some type of a product or service that they provide. So we've got some in this area where people have set up restaurants, so that it's really a mission-based organization. Their mission is to provide employment for people and perform training for people. But since they're running a restaurant and they're selling food, then they can also bring in revenue and perhaps generate some profit in addition to money that they might be getting through other sources, in grants and contributions and things like that. So social enterprise is the combination. There's an organization in the Hartford area here called Reset. They're over in the Parkville area, RESET. Their website is Resetco, resetco.org. And so they focus on social enterprise, social entrepreneurship. And if you want to know more about that, you can touch base with them. The other thing, if somebody ends up being more on the nonprofit side, I usually say, okay, rather than continuing to work with the Entrepreneurial Center, because we are focused on the for-profit side, you might want to contact organizations like in this area, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. So that's a very large foundation. They provide a lot of grants to nonprofits, but for the most part, you have to be a 501c3. So, there's where having to register as a nonprofit is meaningful, because otherwise they won't consider providing any grant funding. There's another organization, I think it's called the Nonprofit Alliance. That's an organization in Hartford down in the Coltsville area. And that's a group of other nonprofits. So it's an organization where you can connect with like-minded people and work more on the nonprofit side of things. So just thought I'd bring that out up front. So maybe if you're more in the nonprofit side, you can explore some of those other things. So we're now getting into kind of the meat of the presentation. And it's really in 3 parts. This first part is labeled 10 steps to startup. And it's just a few different things that I talk about, which relates to what people need to know about any of these particular items. The second part of the presentation uses a business plan and business plan sections to talk about the different things that you need to understand about starting and running a business. And we're going to step through the business plan, talk about the narrative part of it, which describes the business, and also the financial part of it, which is when you get into financial statements and what are the major financial statements, and what do they tell you and why are they important. And then the third part of the presentation will be sort of a rundown of some different areas that people are just getting involved in, thinking about starting their own business, that they need to consider, that they need to think about. So it's just something that says, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Because maybe you've been employed for a number of years in a larger organization, corporation, or whatever, and that's one type of situation. But now, taking a leap into a startup is kind of different, and so you have to take that into consideration when you're deciding upon taking the leap and kind of knowing what you're getting involved in. So those are the three sections, and so we'll start with this one and then go through the others. And I usually end up talking for 2 hours. I always fall behind for some reason, but if we get toward the end, maybe we'll have some time for questions and anything. But if not, you can always follow up with me. I gave you my email address primarily, and I think later on in the presentation, I give you my cell phone number too. You can call me directly. Okay, so let's get into steps to startup. So what I have here is write a business plan. Now, I'm just going to talk about this from the standpoint of the why, okay? Because sometimes if you talk to somebody and say, well, I need to write a business plan, they might come back and say, oh, you don't need a business plan. People write those things and they throw it in the drawer and they never look at it again. But number one, that's kind of missing the point, okay? The reason for writing a business plan, number one, is to make sure that you understand all of the different elements that are involved in starting and running a business. So by stepping through it, section by section, step by step, you get to answer those questions. And in fact, I sometimes tell people I could probably put together between 50 and 75 questions. And if we had a conversation and I asked you the questions and you had the answers, then that in effect means that you understand all of those different things. Okay, if you don't, well, what you need to do is be aware that what it is and why it's important, and then research it and get to the point where you do understand it, and then we'll move forward from that point. The second major reason that people write business plans, complete business plans, are because they're looking for funding. And that means that you might be going out and talking to an investor, or you might be going to a bank for a loan or someplace else. Most likely they're going to say, okay, send us your business plan, because they want to look at something in writing that says you've gone through all of these things and you have an answer to all of those questions. And we're going to use that to kind of gauge what we think about the probable success of the business. Because certainly if they're loaning your money, their main goal in life is that they want that money repaid along with the interest or their return on investment. So it's important to write a business plan. I'm going to talk a little bit more when we get through it about what it ends up looking like. And it can look like anything that is almost like at a summary level, that maybe is just a few pages, but it touches all of the important points, up to some people, write 150, 200-page business plans because, they're building a manufacturing facility and they're going to manufacture some types of items and they need sophisticated, expensive equipment and whatever. Those types of business plans, completely different animal because they have to have a lot of detail. So you have to determine at some point in time, what level do you need to drill it down into it based on what your business is and how you're going to operate it. And also, if you are going to go for funding, you have to understand the level of detail that the funder is looking for in putting this together. So, but it is important, and it provides the framework for everything else that you're doing. So next one, get assistance and training. So you're here, so you're already doing that. Continue to do it. Look around, local area, you'll find all sorts of organizations that provide some level of training and support. The government at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level is very interested in having people be successful in this area. You'll see a lot of things that promote entrepreneurship, sessions, co-working areas, groups, and on and on and on. So try to become aware of everything that's out there, investigate it, and see if there's something there that you can take advantage of to fill in the gaps about what you need going forward. Choosing a business location. I always think about taking this out of this list because it sort of says that you're going to have to think hard and strong about where your business is being located, but it really turns out that these days that some businesses are in the cloud, so to speak. So you're not worried about buying a warehouse or renting an office or having some kind of a physical location, buying a building. So you may not be getting involved in looking at physically locating, but I also do come across a lot of businesses where they locate their business is important because it has to do with access to their particular audience or target market. And a little later on, I'll probably give you a couple of examples of that, of clients that I've worked with that, choosing where their business was located was very important to their ultimate success. Okay, financing your business. Again, I like the word spectrum. I apply it to many different things, and financing your business fits on a spectrum anywhere from one end that says, I may not need very much money to get started. Especially if you're starting something like a consulting business, you have the knowledge. The main thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to find clients and customers that you can assist and that they will pay you. And at the other extreme is sometimes people need quite a bit of money. I had a friend of mine that had an idea for creating a composting plant. And when he was going around, he was looking for $50 million to put this plant in place. So, that's another extreme. Or you can look up and see what Elon Musk at Tesla has been doing the last number of years in terms of looking at probably not only multi-millions, but he's probably in the billion-dollar category and has financed his business startup and expansion to the nth degree. So again, very specific to you, you have to understand where you fit in this. You need a little bit of money or no money, or maybe the money that you have or need, you already have and you can fund it yourself. You might go to another level. And so we'll talk some more about the details of that, but think about how much money you're going to need to get the business started. And incidentally, also think in terms of how much money you might need upfront to keep the business running to the point where it becomes profitable, or you're generating positive cash flow. Talk a little bit more about that as we get into the details. So how much money do you need? Where is it going to come from? Determining your legal structure. On the next slide, we'll talk about setting up LLCs. Some of you may already have taken that step. But the legal structure really comes down to separating anything connected with your business from anything connected with your personal side, primarily in protecting assets and things like that. So if you're running a business and something happens and somebody files a suit against the business, they can only go after what's connected with the business. So, you might own a home, you have, automobiles, any number of different assets, investment savings, all of that is separate from the business. Whereas if you're something like a sole proprietor, where you haven't set up this legal structure, then what that means is that you are open to having all of your, personal assets up for grabs, if you will, if somebody decides to come after you from filing suit or whatever. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. For a small business, it's pretty straightforward and inexpensive to create that divide between personal and business. So we'll talk more about that, but that's an area to consider. So many times people that haven't been in this, think about starting the business, and it's sort of like this whole cloudy picture of like, what is it I don't know? What do I need to know? How many different things do I have to do to register the business, make somebody aware that I've got the business, and all the rest of it? What do I have to do with the state, the federal government, that? So I tried to step through this from the very basic step of just kind of getting into business. Okay. So usually somebody comes up and they say, okay, this is the business name. So you develop that, and sometimes it's, even your own personal name, but some name that you're going to associate with the business. And really, if you wanted to look at the basic thing that you have to do to kind of get into business, I tell people, well, if you're going to operate out of your house, or you're going to operate in a particular city or town, register with that city and town. Tell them that, I'm running a business at this particular location. They want to know what kind of a business it is and whatever, because there are zoning issues, and they don't want, somebody to be doing some industrial work in a residential area and stuff like that. And there are cases where, cities and towns tax businesses because of, assets they have, big computer systems and things like that. But anyway, if you go and you say, okay, register with the town, and doing DBA means doing business as, that you have a business name, that's kind of really, one thing that you could do to just get the business started. And let's say you're a consultant and you don't have to do anything else to get started. Now you're out looking for clients. So let's say you find a client, you start to do business with them. They pay you, okay, and of course you keep track of how much you're getting paid by your customers and clients. And then when the time comes that you're going to do income taxes, could be very straightforward, where you're doing your typical, 1040 returns. And if you've been working for somebody, you got a W-2 statement and you indicate what your income was. But now, if you have business income, there's going to be just a different place on the form that says, have you had any other income from a business? And if the answer is yes, you're just going to have to fill out a separate, what they call Schedule C, that says, here's how much money your costs and expenses were, here's how much profit or income resulted, and that's the amount of money that you're going to pay tax on. And you can do that and file it, and at that point in time, use your social security number to identify yourself. So it's just, you're running a business. You can even be set up as an LLC, registered, and you've handled that legal thing. We'll cover that in a minute. But you're out there doing business, providing products or services, getting paid, earning profit, and you're in business. And so I just say that because at a very elementary level, there's not a whole lot that's involved in getting started, depending upon your business. So let's look at the next level now, next step, okay? Let's say you have one of two conditions. One is that you sell something that you're required to collect sales tax on, state, local taxes or whatever. Now that means you're collecting the tax and you have to remit that, let's say, to the state. If that's the case, then you have to go and you have to register with the Department of Revenue Services. So you can see over here, ct.gov/DRS, Department of Revenue Services. So you tell them who you are, what your business is. You understand what the requirements are for you to collect and remit the taxes. They're going to assign you a tax ID. So now you have a number that represents the business, and that tax ID can be used to identify the business within the state. So if you registered with Connecticut, that tax ID is only good for Connecticut. The other condition that you have to consider relative to registering is if you have employees. Now, not independent contractors, other contractors that you would hire to provide services or something to you, that they have their own businesses. But if you hired employees, this means they're technically employee. You have to withhold, all of the monies, that goes toward Social Security and other taxes. So again, here you are with employees having to do the withholding, and then you have to remit that money to the state. So this is another area where you register with the Department of Revenue Services. Now, the next level is if you are running a business in multiple states and you want to get this ID to have one identification number that you can use in every state that you operate in. And I don't mean that if you're selling something to somebody in another state, you're actually operating there, then you can get an EIN number from the IRS. So this is at the federal level. You register at the irs.gov. You now have a number that if you're working in multiple states, you can use that one number to identify your business. So those are kind of the three levels, starting out very elementary and then kind of stepping up to, just understand things about your business and where you might have to, register with the state or the federal government. Once you get past the general requirements and you now get down into the type of business that you have, there obviously are some restrictions or limitations or requirements for particular businesses. So, for instance, food preparation, restaurants, bars, things like that. All of a sudden, now you get into a specific business that says, I may need licenses, I may need permits, I mean this or that. So here, in addition to, just looking at, state level information sites or going to the local government to understand what their requirements are for the particular type of business, there is a site which is offered at the state level. It's called advancedct.org. And they bill themselves as kind of like the one-stop shop for Connecticut. So you can go on and there's a lot of information out there that you can find out about what's required for particular types of businesses. And from that point on, a lot of times you'll go one place and you will find information, but you'll also find out that there's some other location that provides information. And so that's in effect your job to make sure that you drill down enough that you understand everything that you need to be doing for your particular type of business. And then the last point I've got on this list is registering as a limited liability company. So at one end, I mentioned before, you can just be a sole proprietorship. It just means that you're out there, kind of running your business as an individual. And from a liability standpoint, you're kind of wide open. You are your business, vice versa. Once you get to the point of saying, well, I need to look more like a corporation where I separate my business from everything that's personal. At the level that you're at, the entry level, I would say 80 or 90% of those people coming through the Entrepreneurial Center take the step of registering as this limited liability company. And so the way you do that is through the Secretary of the State's office. So it's state level portal.ct.gov/SOTS, Secretary of the State. You can do it online. Once you go to the site, it will ask you what the business name is. So it does a lookup to make sure that there's no other business of that same name. And if there isn't, then it just wants other information about, okay, who are the members of this LLC? It could be a single member, maybe just you, or you can set up partnerships or multi-member, and address, all that other good stuff. I believe it costs about $125. And once you follow through on the process and you pay the fee, then you become a limited liability company. And when you have the business name, it should be followed by the LLC designation, indicating that you are that type of structure. And of course, as you get into each of these things, I mean, these days with Google, if you want to understand more about what a limited liability company is, just go out and do a search and you'll find all kinds of information out there. But recommended and easy to do and not expensive, gives you peace of mind. So that's the 10 steps. Just, variety of things to tell people about what they should think about. If they're not aware of it, dig into it a little bit more. So next, the second part of the presentation is talking about all of the different aspects of business broken down into categories, which are really reflected by what is contained within a business plan. And so on this first slide, I just want to mention a few different general ideas. And when you're putting this together, there's a kind of a very beginning step that a lot of people either skip over or they don't spend very much time thinking about. And that is the really basic idea of why a business really, comes about. And it's usually because somebody has defined an unmet or underserved need that exists. Take a drink of water every once in a while. This is where my voice starts giving out. Sorry about that. So, what's a need that you've identified? Now, sometimes people use the word problem. So you could ask the question, what problem do you see out there that you have a solution for? Sometimes you could even use the word pain. You see that in all of medical pharmacy advertisements and pharmaceuticals, pain. And the idea is, do you have a way to eliminate the pain or to remediate or soothe the pain? And so putting things in that context and thinking about your business, you should be able to tell somebody what the need is that you're satisfying, what the problem is that you're solving, or what the pain is that you're helping to eliminate. And in doing that, what you're trying to do is determine the level of demand for your product and or service. So once you're in business and you're offering that product or service, are people going to buy it? And is there a sufficient number of people out there that are going to buy the product or service that's going to allow you to run a profitable business? So think about that a little bit. in your particular area, if somebody asked you that question, how would you be able to answer it? And then it's kind of looking at identifying gaps, meaning that, okay, what stands between where I am now and where I need to be able to deliver on following through with the business concept. What that amounts to is when you start out in the beginning, you might have to spend some time doing research. This is what you're doing a little bit of now. You're researching to try to find information about things you need to start up. But you might have to research other things relative to, what that identifying your target market and where are they and how many of them are and what other demographic type things. Looking at what competition is out there for your type of business, maybe looking at the industry you're in and what the trends are in that particular industry. Depending upon your business, you might have to spend a lot of time working on an operations plan because it's a very sophisticated, involved business. In other cases, there may not be any operations plan whatsoever because it's pretty straightforward. Developing a marketing plan. This is where most of the time is spent once you get the business going because you put a lot of things in place. You're able to deliver what you say you're going to deliver, but now the idea is how do you grow the business? What things do you do to get the word out there to make more people aware that you exist, your business exists, what you offer, why they should be interested in it, and ultimately getting more clients and customers. And then, of course, the financial plan. The financial plan takes all of the narratives of the business, everything that you describe about the business, and it converts it into numbers. And interestingly, the numbers tell the tale. If the purpose of a business is to create a reasonable profit, for yourself and whomever, then that's got to be reflected in the financials. It gets translated into dollars. How much profit? When is it? How long will it take to get to that point of generating the desired level of profit? So understanding the different financial aspects of the business, very important. And once you go through all of these different things, the first step especially, you take pause and you kind of review it and look at it, maybe discuss it with somebody, find out if that reflects really what you are trying to accomplish. If not, you may have to go back and revise some of your assumptions and put something else in there to figure out, okay, this is what I need to do to accomplish what I'm setting out to accomplish, making adjustments as needed. There's a lot of business plan templates out there. I've got the one specified here that's on the score.org website. There's two files. One is a Word document, the other is an Excel spreadsheet. And when I go through the rest of this presentation, I'm just going to step through the different sections that are in that particular plan. Now, there are a whole bunch of other templates that are out there, scores. I was going to say hundreds, but not hundreds, tens. And I've used a lot of them. I probably have gone through 6 or 8 different types of business plan templates that people use. I've concluded that they all have the same content, topic, subject matter. They may put it in a different form. They may have you input numbers and things in a different fashion, but they're all pretty much the same once the business plan gets developed. But this is one template. When people want to, have me step through something to explain, what the templates are, I've just kind of got down to the point where I use the score template. But if there's something else out there that you like, you can do that too. So let's step through the sections. So this is what a typical table of contents would look like on the business plan. And the first section is the executive summary, and I'll go through and I will describe each of these in details and what's included in it. So number one, table of contents. Number two, the executive summary. Now, the important thing about the executive summary is that you do this section after you've completed all of the other sections in the business plan. Because as you can see in what it covers all of the material, except it just does it in a summarized manner. And the reason for the executive summary is that a lot of times, especially if you have a even a 50-page or a 100-page business plan, and you say to somebody, hey, I'd like you to take a look at this, maybe I'm looking for funding or whatever, they will probably be reluctant to immediately wade into reading the whole business plan. But if they can look at a 1 or 2 page summary at the very front that gives them an idea in a highlighted fashion about what the business is, what it does, what products and services you offer, how you're going to market it, what your operations plan is if it's required. Tell me a little bit about the management organization, who's running it, who's behind it. Show me the financial plan, bottom line figures. I don't need to see every detail, but, tell me how this is going to progress over the course of maybe 1, 2, 3 years. And also, what are you looking for in terms of startup capital? So I worked for a angel investor group for about a year through the Connecticut Technology Council. And I was functioning as the person who dealt with entrepreneurs that submitted applications for funding. And we had what amounted to a 1-page summary business plan. So on a single sheet of paper, we could look at it and look at basically this information. And from that, make some decisions. Number one, a lot of times people put the application in and we would look at what the business was. And maybe it was a bioscience company. Well, we didn't invest in bioscience companies. So I didn't have to go any further. I could send them a Dear John letter saying, hey, thanks for submitting this, but we don't deal with that type of business. We don't have the expertise. So good luck in your search. So it could also, provide something that, tweaks your interest where you look at something and say, well, now that's kind of an interesting idea. And they're looking for so much money and that fits within the range that we deal in. So maybe the decision front end for us would be, well, let's go and find out more about this information. And now in that particular case, I would contact them and say, okay, we've got your 1-page application, kind of have an idea about what you do. Now, can we spend a little bit more time understanding, more in detail? So if you've got a business plan, send us the business plan and we'll take a look at it. So that's how, that the use of that and why it's important, mostly on the receiving side, to allow people to see something that tells them what it's all about without having to wade through a huge plan. So it's executive summary up front and done after all of the other details. Next section, of course, getting into describing what your business is all about. And there are different things that you can put in here. Sometimes people use this section to include a little bit of personal, story about how they came to be interested in doing this. Maybe it's somewhat of a discussion about how they discovered that unserved need or the problem and how they came up with how they were going to approach it. And so, you have to decide yourself, how you kind of want to lead into this, but in a way that describes what this business does and, more importantly, why, it's something that there is a demand for, The reader is going to read it and say, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. That sounds like a good idea, that they've really identified something here. So I've got down here products and services sold. So when you do the business plan, you don't have to cover every item that's listed out in a particular template. So like before, when I was talking about getting into operations, well, if there's nothing involved with operations in the business that you're trying to promote, well, just skip over that section. You don't really have to put anything in here. Likewise, I've got down here products and services. Well, you might have one section in the business plan that talks about the business and also gets into describing the product or services, or like in this case of this template, they have a separate section. So they've got this first section that describes the business more in general, and then following this will be a section where they'll get more involved in describing the specific products and services. But maybe you've identified a niche market that you want to discuss, and why you've found that to be important. Anything else relative to where the business is going to be, how it's going to be operating, maybe something about what's happening within the industry, market climate, and maybe some general discussion about staffing, whatever describes how the business is going to operate. When you look at the industry level, I tell people that in many cases, that's kind of just understanding the types of businesses that are in the industry, and maybe more importantly, what the trends are within the industry. So, one big trend that we're witnessing, which is very interesting, is the fact that in the automobile industry, since Elon Musk came along, all of a sudden he was successful in turning everybody's attention to electric vehicles. And I think right now, since this has been going on for a while and those cars are being produced, virtually every major automobile manufacturer has announced that they are going to be producing electric vehicles. In some cases, some manufacturers have indicated that they were going to phase out combustion engine automobiles. So think about that in terms of a major trend that's happening, and then what's going to be ultimately impacted. 100 years from now, will there be gas stations? I don't know, maybe a few, but probably not very many. And of course, we see charging stations popping up all over the place. So, that's going to be a whole different thing. And there will be other things that come up that people haven't even thought of yet that relate to this change that's happened in the industry in transitioning to electric power. So, think of that all in terms of your particular business and what affects the market that you are running after or targeting. Okay, so as I mentioned before, you might have a separate section because of the nature of the products and services that gets into more detail, describes them, features, what the benefits are to the market that you're addressing. Probably major point is what differentiates you from your competition, direct competition, indirect competition. For some reason, I always end up talking about pizza restaurants, or we used to call them pizza parlors. Or I just watched the program recently, and now I've got a new term because we go for a Pete's. There was a program on PBS about the three pizza places down in New Haven, Pepe's, Sally's, and Modern. And so I learned a lot about pizza making. Anyway, so if you're going to open up a pizza restaurant in my town, there must be about 15 or 20 that already exist. And so if I'm opening mine, what's going to differentiate mine from everybody else's? So sometimes it's the product. You probably have, been in the position where, I like the pizza at this particular place versus that particular place because they make it different. Maybe they have different sauce, different style. Maybe pricing is different. You're going to be the least expensive pizza place in town. Or maybe you're going to target a particular market. I know that one of the places in my town seemed to focus in on Little League. So somehow or other they sponsored teams and they got involved so that when somebody says, where are we going for pizza? It's probably the kids that say, well, let's go there. And so they define their niche. And so probably each one in town I could look at and I could describe why they're a little bit different than all of the other pizza places that are in town. Obviously, when you're running a business, it's not just the direct competitors. If you're opening a pizza restaurant, your competition is all of the other restaurants that exist, even though it might be Thai or Italian or Chinese, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to take that into account. And even more, indirect types of competition that mean that somebody's going somewhere else to get their needs satisfied and not to you. And then in this section, if it's the type of thing where you've got anything that protects what you're offering from competitors that they can't replicate it, or there's some other barrier to entry that keeps other people out, then obviously you want to present that because that's important. A lot of times, people look at something and they say, okay, that's interesting. But if you do that, what's going to stop somebody, the first person that sees it, to say, oh, I'm going to do that too? And in many cases that will happen. But if you've thought about it ahead of time, maybe you can put something in place that's going to provide some level of protection. Then we get into the area of marketing and selling. This is my favorite. My background, I've worked in a lot of different areas of business. So I've been on the technical side and I've been in the sales and marketing side and management and executive and whatever. So touching all the bases, accounting, finance. And the marketing selling area is very interesting in that it's on one hand, marketing is kind of an umbrella term, and it could encompass everything starting with the idea that you have for a business and product and service through all of the steps that lead to being able to sell that product or service, getting paid for it, money in the bank, generating a profit. Marketing can also be used as a subset term. So instead of covering everything, marketing can be all of the steps that lead up to, in effect, finding prospects, identifying potential customers or clients. And then when you get to that point, it can morph into what becomes a selling function. You've identified somebody that's exhibited an interest. Now, how do you get them to become a buyer, a customer? And because of my background and when I was in sales and managing sales forces, it was selling big ticket items, computers, communication systems to businesses and industry. Big ticket items, anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for systems. And so, it required face-to-face selling, a lot of steps up to contract. And so that represented something that was people to people, face to face. Obviously, at some point in time, the internet came into existence and e-commerce came into existence. So all of a sudden, people discovered that they could get on the internet, they could set up a site, show an inventory or something or another, and the buyer could look at it like on Amazon and decide, oh, yes, I want that. And they hit the buy button and pay for it. And the next thing is it arrives on their doorstep. So you get away from that sales team, people to people type thing. And I thought about that a while back, but I realized that you still had the division between the marketing and the selling side of things. And one way might be to look at it is to say, okay, if let's say I have a website and that represents like the core location, it's sort of like my my store, so to speak, if somebody was to walk in the door, except now they visit my website, to get various types of information and maybe to buy something. But the idea is the marketing part of it is all of the different things that you do that lead up to getting people to visit the website. Similar to all of the things that you would do in marketing to get somebody to visit your retail store or come to your restaurant or whatever. The second step is, okay, now they came in the store or they visited the website. Now what happens to get them to the point where they become a paying customer? And so, somebody goes into a jewelry store. Well, they're obviously there because they've got an interest in something. And now it's going to be the idea of working with them, providing some, if you want to call it salesmanship, and making sure that you understand what they're looking for, that you direct them to the appropriate products and price points and whatever, pointing out things that might make them interested. And so with that customer, they could say, okay, well, thanks very much. I like what you showed me. I don't see anything I liked. And they leave the store, and that's the end of it. Same thing is true with the website. So, they come to the website and they poke around a little bit. And do they ever push the buy button, or do they just not find what they're looking for and then they go someplace else? So now it's your job, as the owner to, depending upon how your business is set up, look at those things and say, even if I'm working in this digital environment, is my website set up correctly? I guess first of all, am I doing the things on the marketing side that drive people to the website? And this is a lot where social media comes into play. So where somebody sees something and it tweaks their interest and they get directed or linked to the site. And then the second step is, once you get the visitors, what are they looking at? How are they going through the site? And are they abandoning at some point? If where, or are they going through and buying? I saw something I never saw before in terms of understanding what's going on in a website, and it was called it is called a heat map, and it's software that actually analyzes traffic through the site to tell you where people are going when they arrive at the site, and you understand in effect the routes they're choosing and where they abandon, or whether or not they take a particular path to getting to that point where they actually buy something. So I only go through all of that because it's the idea of what's marketing and what's sales, and it can be looked at as like two halves of the umbrella. Okay, so this marketing selling, it's a big funnel. There's all sorts of different things that you can do using the tools that are out there to promote the business: advertising, public relations, TV, radio, printed materials, flyers, email, text messaging, telephone, on and on and on and on. And so when you get into this area, it's sort of like, understanding all of the things that are at the top of the funnel and trying to identify the ones that are going to be most effective in your business toward, reaching the intended audience or target market, providing them with the right message that gets them interested, issuing some call to action that gets them to do something, and then, finally following up so that you convert them into a client or a customer, and any other type of follow-up. And it may not just be hitting the buy button. It might be getting their emails so that they sign up for a newsletter, so you're able to contact them later on. Or maybe the next step is that they contact you directly. You know, if you're interested, call me right now, this telephone number, or fill out a form, or contact me via email. You lay out whatever the next steps are that you want them to take. And so all of that is, at the bottom here, it's like generating leads, prospects. After you've done that in the marketing side, going off into looking at the selling side, either maybe person to person or through the site, the internet, being able to deliver the product or service, obviously, and then getting paid for it. And maybe even beyond that, to make sure that you're not getting excessive returns. If you are, maybe that points out the fact that there's something that needs to be changed in the product or what you're offering. So this area always requires a lot of understanding, involvement, and also it's not anything that you just do once, which is probably also true with other aspects of what I'm covering with this business plan, because it's a cycle. It's ongoing. I mean, you're always looking for new clients, new customers, if only to replace some that you're probably going to lose at some point in time. Why do you lose a client or customer? I don't know. Maybe they moved out of state. Boom. They're not there anymore. So that means that you've got to go out and find somebody else. So it's always in movement. Okay, won't get too much into this. Each time I talked about operations, I basically said, if you've got a lot in that area, then you have to put the time into describing it. If there's nothing much that's involved with physical operations or anything, then you probably don't have to touch on it at all. People management team, especially when you're looking for funding. This is kind of important to be able to really highlight who's behind this, anything that's connected with background, experience, skills, training, education, credentials. In the case of you're starting up a business, maybe it's just you to begin with. You might be able to go in and talk to a funder and, on the strength of just you and what you're trying to do, have them, feel confident. But I also indicate that it's possible that you can go out and perhaps identify some people that would become part of an advisory board, other people that have that additional level of experience. And so that if you're putting together the business plan and describing this management team, that you've got some other individuals that you can put forth that you're connected with and work with that will support your efforts going forward with the business. Because who's ever looking at this is kind of looking at it and saying, okay, I see what the idea is behind this business. Does this person or do these people have the wherewithal to be able to execute on it, carry it off, and make it successful? Okay, so all of those things that I just touched on would be covered in the narrative part of the business plan. You would be going through describing all of those things. And so now we've got to take all of that and we've got to convert it into numbers. So this is a point where a lot of people, because they just never been exposed to it, might take a gander at an income statement or a cash flow statement or whatever, and really have little or no understanding of it because they've never seen it before. But when you get to this, it can be understandable if you just look at what the major financial statements tell you. And there's all sorts of different types of reports and statements that you can generate, but the income statement, the cash flow statement, and the balance sheet are pretty much the big three, the most common. They apply to every business. So I don't care if you're a startup and you just got one client and you're collecting some money. You can break it down in this way. If you want to look at a Fortune 50 or a Fortune 500 company, guess what? Every one of them will have an income statement, cash flow statement, balance sheet. And if they're public companies, that's the information that they publish in terms of telling people, how well the business is doing financially. So looking at the very basics of what an income statement tells you, an income statement might also be referred to as a P&L or a profit and loss statement. Income being synonymous with profit, but it's called an income statement. And it's simply looking at the money that you're bringing into the business through your sales of products and or services, subtracting from that any costs and expenses that you incur. And when you subtract those, you're left with either a profit or a loss. Now, the second thing, just to point out something, I use two terms in the middle here, cost and expenses. Technically, when you refer to cost, it has to do with when you're selling a product, you either manufacture that product that you're selling and it costs you something to manufacture it, or you're selling a product that you've purchased from somebody else for resale. So if I sell clothing, typically I'm going to buy from somebody at wholesale, that's my cost, and then I'm going to sell it at retail, that's the revenue. So usually what happens is you look at your cost basis first. So you just go through this step of saying, okay, I'm selling and I'm bringing revenue in, but it cost me this much in terms of either manufacturing the product or buying it from somebody else. And I subtract that cost from the revenue to come up with what I call a gross profit. I won't get into the details of it, but if you're selling a product, it's kind of important for you to have that information at that level. And then after that, you subtract all of the other expenses. So costs and expenses are both money out the door, and they both get subtracted from revenue. And that's it, profit and loss. So when you look at the spreadsheet, you might be looking at a lot of other details. You might be looking at a list of all of the different types of expenses that you're incurring, but they're just all the same category. They're all expenses. So that's a very important statement. And when you're starting a business up, you typically will create what's called a pro forma income statement. And what that is it's an income statement, but it's based on assumptions. You're going to come up with assumptions about if you're selling widgets, how many widgets are you going to sell? What price are you going to sell them at? And that determines, and then you're going to estimate what your costs and expenses are. And that is going to tell you what your profit or loss is based on those assumptions. Now, once the business gets started, you're no longer dealing just with assumptions, numbers that you've put together that is, are the best you can come up with and as close to being accurate. But then when you're running the business, then this is going to reflect actual dollars and cents. It's going to say this month I took in this much in revenue. This month my costs were this much and my expenses were this much. And this month, this is the profit and loss that I incurred. And every month you do that, every quarter you do that. Typically at the end of the year, you look at it and you say, okay, for this particular year, here's what this business produced in profit or loss. So this is the very basic, to me, the number one financial statement that you should become familiar with. And it's something that you work on if you're doing the business plan and you're using that score spreadsheet or any other spreadsheet that breaks it down like this. I won't get too much into the cash statement. It's very similar to the income statement, but it's actually dealing in cash in and cash out. So, for instance, if you took a loan out for $10,000, that would be money or cash that comes into the business that you can use, but it wouldn't be reflected on the income statement because that cash didn't come from selling a product or service. It's not considered revenue. So it's important to be knowledgeable about cash flow because in effect, you always have to know whether or not you've got sufficient money in the bank to be able to pay your bills. So if you get to the point where I had a client once and I went in and the owner was a little bit out of sorts, and by the time I got him to explain to me what was going on, he said, I just found out that I don't have enough money in my account to meet payroll tomorrow. And he had about 10 employees. He had a cash flow problem. And the reason was that he didn't receive a check that he was expecting to receive. And the check wasn't going to arrive until Tuesday. So his solution to that was meeting with the employees and saying, you know, we had a problem, not getting paid tomorrow, but you will be paid on Tuesday. Happily, they were understanding and, you know, it all worked out. But you don't want to be in that position where all of a sudden one day you find out that there's no money in the bank to pay bills or meet payroll or whatever. The cash flow is important. And then finally, the balance sheet just keeps track of, you know, what your ownership is in the business. And over time, what you want to do is you want to increase the value of your equity or ownership in the business. So the best I can do here is use a mortgage example where, let's say that you had a house, and just for discussion's sake, you sell the house for $200,000. That was the value of the asset, okay? But you have a $150,000 mortgage. That's a liability. So once you subtract the mortgage, you have to pay off the mortgage, the 150 from the 200 that you got from selling the house. You're left with your owner's equity in the house, the $50,000. Same thing with the business, assets, liabilities, and owner's equity. And what you want to do over time is build the business, make it more profitable. Whatever you keep in the business increases your equity and ownership in that business. So that's it. That's the financial statements, the big three, what you would be working on and doing if you were to put that together in your business statement. These are things that people like myself, business advisor, can give you assistance with in explaining, you know, what to do, and sometimes even come up with the numbers that you would input, you know, the assumptions and whatever. Okay, last thing on the financial side is coming up with how much money do you need to get started and to operate the business for some period of time until it becomes profitable or produces a positive cash flow. So if you were to take out a loan or get funding, you have to list off what your startup expenses would be. This is before you open the doors, so to speak. Do you have to purchase any equipment or other long-term assets? Do you have to buy inventory, raw materials? And do I need some level of working capital for operating expenses for that period of time that I was just talking about? So you come up with a number. So I have people come in and, you know, one person says, you know, I do need money. I need maybe $20,000. You know, somebody else comes in and they say, yeah, I need money. I need $750,000. So how much? It's up to you. That's what you have to decide. So first is, how much do I need? What am I going to use it for? And then these are all of the different places you can go, right? You might not need much to begin with, or even so, you might have that covered, personal savings or whatever. You can maybe tap family and friends, get loans, lines of credit, get into the equity side where you give up a share of the ownership in the business to an angel investor, individual, group, or venture capital people or person. Sometimes suppliers will help you out by providing you with inventory because they want you to carry their product. Sometimes customers, if they see you developing a product that's ultimately going to help them that doesn't exist, they might help fund the endeavor. So you can be creative, and there are other funders, sources out there for startup capital. We can also help with that to determine what you're looking for and some sources of that. And the last thing, which is just a general thing, because a lot of people, when they start the business, they ask the question about, how do I take money out of the business? Am I an employee? And typically you are not an employee. So you're not going through all of the things that normally happens with an employee in terms of withholding and all the rest of it. What you are doing is you're looking at the sort of the health of the business. And when the business is operating in a strong enough fashion and there's cash available or whatever, owners typically will make a decision at that point to take an owner's draw. In other words, draw money out of the business. So you can learn how to go about doing that from a financial transaction standpoint. But right here, I'm just kind of pointing out that in answer to that question, how do you take money out? It's not as an employee. It's done as an owner's draw. Okay, third part of the presentation. So we've gone through the sections in the business plan, which really represent different parts of the business. And now we're going to talk about things in general, assuming that you may not have thought about all of the different aspects of what it means to have your own business. And so the purpose of this part of the presentation is just to step through some general areas that sort of bring up the topic, raise the question, and then sort of leave it to you to think about your circumstances and how it relates to you. And so, how are you looking at this? And once you get through and sort of do the plan and look at what you think that the business is going to produce for you, where are you going to be longer term? Do you think you're going to be in a much better, perhaps financial and personal situation than you are now, or otherwise? People have a lot of reasons for starting and running businesses. Some people do it strictly for the income side of it. They just want to get something up and running. They want to earn a decent income from themselves and their family. Other people may be more financially stable, but they still are interested in something and they want to have activity, and so they may be less interested in the financial side of it, but they do want to have and run a business. And then there are people that really think through kind of the other aspect, the next step, meaning that I'd like to do something that positively impacts the community. Being even self-employed and earning your income benefits the community. But if you have a business, you expand the business and you start to provide employment for other people, that in step helps the economy. It helps everybody right up the line. So everything starts at the grassroots level, so to speak. And so if you're successful, that helps the community, and then it goes up state, federal, and ultimately everybody else in one way or another is positively impacted by it. So, again, something that you have to understand your own situation, your own thinking, and what you would like to do. So these are the areas that I'm going to step through in trying to find the right match. You've kind of thought about the business, laid out some things, start to understand what the business is all going to be about. So now let's take a look at each of these different areas. Questions that you have to answer or things that you have to think about. One of it is, why are you doing this? I've come into certain, some people that I've come across and say, so why are you starting a business? And they might say, well, because I don't want to work for anyone else. That's it, plain and simple. I don't want to be an employee. I want my own business. I want to call the shots. I'm making the choice. I'm going to do it. Now, sometimes it comes about by chance. I use my brother as an example because he was working for a corporation for about 10 years. And one day, somebody he knew from the past called him up and said, hey, I'm building a motel in Daytona Beach. I'm looking for a partner. What do you think? And my brother considered it. He said, okay. And boom, something he had never been thinking about just showed up as an opportunity, and he jumped on it. Sometimes people are put in the situation, they're working for a business, company goes out of business, all of a sudden they find themselves not being gainfully employed, and maybe circumstances make it difficult to kind of get back into what they were doing. And so, they have to look at alternatives. And maybe this represents a good alternative to build something for the future. So, number one, think about what's your personal motivation. Stage in life, obviously, and there's always a trade-off. Obviously, when you're younger, you haven't really accumulated much in terms of life or work experience, and gain knowledge. On the other hand, as you move on and you've gone through all of those steps, maybe there's less energy that there was when you were 20 something, but you might be more financially solid and you're able to make some choices to do things that you weren't able to do when you were younger. Maybe you've had children, but they're off on their own now. You don't have to save for that. Any number of different reasons. So some of the questions on here, just to look at the different categories and maybe where you fit in this, and think about that, how that plays into what you're embarking upon. The environment that you kind of live in, we talk about family and friends, and the question comes down to, just looking around, who you're going to be connected with, and is it going to be supportive or is it going to be stressful? So you might be, involved with other people that will pitch in, that know what's going on, that will support and back what you're doing. But if you are in a situation where there's something that's going to be pressuring you and always kind of being an obstacle, a hurdle, the reverse, take that into consideration and just determine whether or not you're up for it. So think about it. Lifestyles. Every time I see this slide, I think of the program, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And so I've come across people that fit into every category you can think of, from the person that the sky's the limit and they want to go out and they're going to build the biggest business, a corporation that you've ever seen in your entire life, and they're going to be one of the wealthiest people on earth, to other people that say, look, I'm interested in putting something together that results in a decent income for me and my family, and I'm just happy to work at that level. And so it's very personal. Everybody has to come up with their own idea about where they want to be, the type of lifestyle, and what they're willing to do to get it, or what they can do. So something else to think about. Of course, background, experience, taking that into account relative to understanding what you're getting involved in. So I restaurants always come to mind when I think of this, because I do get a lot of people that come into the entrepreneurial center saying that they want to start open a restaurant. And so the first thing I usually ask is, okay, what's your background in that type of business? And sometimes people have no background. I had one person who came in that she had some recipes. They were her mother's recipes, and she thought that for this particular type of cuisine that people really like these dishes and everything. And so therefore, based on that, she wanted to open a restaurant. But this particular person had little or no background in business per se, and understood very little, about that aspect of it. So the suggestion was that in one way or another, try to go out and get yourself involved in some type of a restaurant environment, so you can understand what's required to run the business, because it gets into finding space, designing what you want it to look like, decor, signing leases, hiring people, menus, buying supplies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if somebody came in that same situation and said, well, I worked in this capacity for X number of years, and I understand everything that's involved, that's great. That's an entirely different situation. Okay, so financial position. This relates to either, if you do or don't need funding, and everything that enters into that. Incidentally, on the funding, we do get a fair number of people that come in that really don't have much capital to invest, but there are funders that are kind of set up to address that level. So if somebody doesn't have money, they shouldn't be, totally dissuaded from progressing. They should at least, lay out what they'd like to accomplish, because it is possible that if they get, excuse me, in front of the right funder, that they can get capital to start the business. Okay, what's the business environment? Things that enter into this is what we've just experienced with COVID. It affected business, again, restaurants in particular. But what's the economic climate? Sometimes interest rates are really low. You need capital. You don't have to spend much to get it. Other times, rates are sky high, or maybe lenders don't even want to lend because of the climate. So you have to kind of be aware of where you are, and maybe more importantly, where you expect things to be in the future. So, somebody that's looking at starting a business now, if it's been impacted by COVID, maybe the thinking needs to be, what do you think things will be like 6 months from now or a year from now? What might be different? There's always risk associated with those types of things, but you have to think about it. What are market trends? We talked about that. Capability to follow through and execute. Feasibility of the idea. Market strategy. You have some different way of marketing the business to beat the competition. How easy or difficult will it be to raise capital? And then what other resources are available out there? And I have to say, these days, tremendous amount of resources available at all levels, federal level, state level, local level. because everybody wants to restore the economy at all levels. And so entrepreneurship, small business ownership, very high on the priority list. You probably read a lot of articles in the paper about that. Personality traits. I've come to the conclusion that there's no checklist really. These are certain traits of people, and they might be, for instance, more or less self-disciplined. They may or may not be creative thinkers. They may not be big risk takers, have different levels of confidence. This does sort of enter into it. One of the things I always like to point out on this slide is that you do have to view yourself as being an initiator, because it's not like going to work every day where you have a job, you know what you're supposed to do, somebody lays it out for you. When you wake up in the morning, you're the one that initiates things. You decide what gets done and who gets to do it. So, but these are some of the things that kind of enter into traits that you probably should consider in terms of being a business owner. So all of those things come down to the fact that looking at and reviewing all of those, does all of those things match up with what's going on in the market, the industry, or whatever, that what you're interested in doing and your availability matches up, that your skills and traits, finances, is it a match? So that's, again, just something that you've got to think about, taking all of those things into consideration. And obviously you have to work at it. I always remember somebody who went through one of my early entrepreneurial programs, and they started a business, and then about a year later, they were presenting to a group. And at one point, close to when he was starting out, he said, "This really turned out to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be." So I just have to laugh at that, because I think he just thought that he was, as soon as he understood what needed to be done, that took care of most of it. But obviously, running a business is something that needs to be done on an ongoing basis. So working at it, going back and reiterating, start making sure that there's a demand for what you're providing. Come up with the idea, I outline it, research it, and confirm your assumptions. Commit a business plan to writing. You can determine if it's just for your own purposes. It doesn't have to be, 50 or 100 pages. You can put something down in a few pages that reflects your thinking and your ideas, if the main reason is to do it for your own purposes. If it's for funders, then you have to understand what they're looking for and then provide it accordingly. All right, step at a time, on an ongoing basis, and always, once you initiate something, monitor it, evaluate it, and make changes. Evolve. It's always in motion. So the last part of it is just, where do you go to get assistance and acquire more knowledge? I mentioned before, Small Business Administration, they have websites. The ascent.sba.gov website is, I think, specifically aimed at women business owners. So there are a lot of those types of things that are out there. That's at the kind of the federal level. You'll find state level websites, Department of Economic and Community Development, Connecticut Next, other groups that you'll come across. Think about setting up that advisory team. Think about maybe finding a mentor, somebody that would have the knowledge that you're looking for, that would agree to help you out. joint industry and trade associations, perhaps Chamber of Commerce, your town or city. If you don't have it already, think about getting some type of work or internship or somehow to generate practical experience or that relates to what you want to accomplish. So there's us, Entrepreneurial Center, Small Business Administration. SCORE is also at the federal level. I mentioned score.org. There's a Small Business Development Centers, also federal, but administered by the state through UConn in Connecticut, SBDC. Chambers of Commerce, libraries. Some libraries have business resource centers, like the Simsbury Library in particular, very good business resource center, especially for research. There are career consultants out there that provide services. Business counseling, business training and workshops that we provide, and a lot of the other organizations provide. Technical assistance, help accessing capital. So these are the areas, and there's a lot of organizations around that can help. So keep your eye peeled for that. Way back when I first did this, I decided, because of talking about all of these organizations and the acronyms and abbreviations and who are they and what they do, I told this first group that I was working with, which was called HYPE, which is kind of an acronym, and I said, I'm going to induct you into CAS. Of course, they said, what is CAS? I said, CAS is Connecticut Alphabet Soup. And so as you go forward, and some of these don't exist anymore, but you will come across the SBDCs and the SCORES and the CERCs and the UConns and the IPDDs and the CBCs, and they all are different organizations. Get past the acronyms, find out who they are and what they do, and a lot of times you'll find that in one way or another, they're resource providers that can help you on your journey. So with that, like a minute to spare, and I didn't totally lose my voice. I thank you for attending. Our website, hartford.edu/EC. Sign up for the newsletter if you haven't. General number 860-768-5681. My name, Jack Antonich, and my email, antonich@hartford.edu. So as I mentioned in the beginning, if you want a copy of these presentation slides, shoot me an email, or if you want me to send you the SCORE template, the Word doc, and the Excel spreadsheet, be happy to do that too. Other than that, maybe you'll connect up, set up a business advisor meeting, do a one-on-one, talk a little bit more about your business ideas. So I would look forward to meeting you if you decide to do that. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to be signing off now. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.